Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Ganga Jamuni's Facebook Live series. Today is a very special session. It's a personal session. The fact is that I have a guest today who I'm extremely fond of. I've known her for a very long time, and every time I talk to her, I learn something new about being a woman, being someone who is exploring and intrepid as well as an adventurer. So let's welcome Sucharita Sanyal. Sucharita Sanyal is an educator just like me, and she's a Delhi Bong. Hi, Pishi.
Hi.
Okay, welcome to Ganga Jamuni. And before we begin, I'm going to introduce a little bit about Delhi Bengalis. So Bengalis in Delhi actually go back a long way. The first bunch of intrepid Bengalis settled down in Delhi around early 19th century for want of better opportunities. And remember, they were very educated and they were the first professionals, really. So the first Kalibari of Delhi is the one at Tees Hazari, which still exists, by the way. So the idol of and the Kalibari were first established in 1826, but the temple was destroyed during the 1857 revolt. Now the idol was later salvaged, and then a temple was built in Roshanpura in Delhi. When trains first connected Calcutta to Delhi in 1864, they brought even more Bengalis. The next wave of Bengalis that hit Delhi came out of compulsion when the British Raj shifted from Calcutta to Delhi in 1911. And then along came lots of Bengali babus and their families in tow. Bengali settlers were first put up at Timarpur, interestingly. They belong to central government departments like the Post and the Telegraph, Government of India Press, Accountant General of Central Revenues, Railways, and all kinds of Babu jobs. The British sounding Irvine Road, Albert Square, Havelock Square, they became Bengali Para or the Bengali neighborhoods in no time. Small clubs and libraries grew up, and evening addas became main forms of recreation. So there was a little mini Calcutta or mini Bengal being formed. And the shops came up in Gold Market to cater to Bengali taste and needs. And all of us have definitely heard of Bengali sweets, right? There's nothing Bengali about it, but it is Bengali sweets. Bengali books were available at Saraswati Book Depot. You had household goods at Kamla Bandar. You had Bengali sweets, and you had dhotis at the Mahamaya stores. Now, the Basu Lodge, which came up in 1931 near Gold Market, existed till the early years of the century, were popular among Bengalis who had arrived in Delhi and were looking for a temporary stay. The first generation always planned to go back, but their children grew up and settled in Delhi. Most could not leave Delhi. After retirement, they moved to places like Karol Bagh and later to South Delhi and NCR. Now, my guest, Sucharita Sanyal, or Pishi as I call her family came for completely different reasons. And they've had, this great movement, migration from Kanpur, Calcutta to Delhi. Interestingly, of all her siblings, she is the only Dilli Bong. So let's welcome Sucharita Sanyal, my Pishi. Hi.
Hi. Hi. That's a lovely introduction.
Okay, so shall we start with your name? Because the first time I heard your name, they told me it's Sucharita.
Well, it is Sucharita or Shuchorita, but what would happen is people would start calling me Sucharita and Suchi, and I used to get extremely irritated. So, to make sure that I was not Sucharita or Suchi, I started calling myself Sucharita, which of course everybody laughs at me, but I think I seem to prefer that to Sucharita, though it is actually Sucharita.
Okay, so tell us, like, how did your family originally move to? I know that we are going to be talking about your family a lot in the beginning, and then, of course, moving on to your exploration and your own adventurous journey of finding your roots. So let's begin with how your family first moved to your particular nuclear family, moved to Delhi, and then we'll go on to your background.
Well, we grew up in Calcutta. when I was in class 2, my father got transferred to Kanpur. We were in Kanpur for a few years, and eventually we came down to Delhi. My brothers have all studied in Calcutta. Their schools, colleges, everything has been in Calcutta. I'm the only one who has grown up in Kanpur and, of course, now in Delhi. So I studied in Delhi. My school was in Delhi. My college was Delhi. So there's been this interesting disconnect also. My brothers are Calcutta born. I am essentially a Dilli wala. So there is, and even when we were growing up, I could see that difference. I wanted to fit in with my friends. So I was trying to behave a little oddly. I wouldn't want to eat Bengali food. I wanted to eat the rajma chawals and the chole bhatures. I wanted to eat curry chawal. So I was at a bit of a denial of my Bengali roots, and there was a reason for it. I was the only Bengali amongst my friends. I have never known I've never had a Bengali friend. My connect is either my family, all my Bengali roots are my family, immediate and extended, and that's about it. Whereas, the problem is I'm very much a Bengali. I read Bengali, I love reading Bengali, but home and outside were two different places. That was Ghore and Baire. So Baire, I was trying to fit in with my friends, with my peers. At home, I was a Bengali. But I don't think we were very typically a Bengali family because of my mother. She was very cosmopolitan. She was born in Nagpur, grew up in Kasoli, then sent off to a boarding school in Banaras run by the Theosophical Society. She got married and went off to Calcutta, heart of Calcutta, North Calcutta, Shambazar. So her movement has been very cosmopolitan. She is, I don't think, so our household was not the very typical Bengali household either, but we were definitely a very Calcutta family. So we were never a Probashi Bengali. We were never Pravasis. The Calcutta connect was always so strong that we were never Pravasis. I am a Dilli Bengali, a Delhi Bong. I like calling myself Bong. I don't know why. Earlier on, we were always told, oh, you're a Bong. So I somehow thought I'll make it a little more positive, and I was happy being called a Bong, and I love being called a Bong. So I'm a Dilli Bong, grew up here. I love this city in spite of all its problems. And I don't think I would be able to live anywhere else. Though my family actually lives, the rest of them live in Calcutta. So, yes, Delhi has been my home. There has been a bit of a disconnect with initial years. Later on, I think as I grew older, I became more conscious of my Bengali roots. The fact that I always loved reading, it helped. I was every bit a Bengali at home, but outside I wasn't one. And I didn't even like it if people said, "Aap kahan se aaye ho? Aap kahan ke ho?" And I would always say Delhi. And they would say, "Nahi, but aap ho kahan ke?" And I would immediately retort and say, "Aap kahan ke rehne wale ho?" Because I did not like that. So I was always very conscious about my being a Bengali, but also trying to fit in with the rest of my friends. But, we spoke Bengali at home, which is very interesting. And I took a lot of pride in that. While most of my friends spoke English in their house, I think they spoke their mother tongue with their mother. But rest of the time, it was essentially English. But I took a lot of pride, and I would tell them, "Hum to ghar mein Bengali bolte hain." With a lot of pride. So there was this confusion in my mind also. Very proud of my Bengali roots, at the same time trying to fit in desperately with the Delhi people. I won't say they were North Indians. Delhi was a cosmopolitan city. So we had South Indians, North Indians, East, West, everyone. And I was trying to fit into the Delhi culture. Or I think that's what I would say. So that is what Delhi was for me and has been.
Wonderful. So I think this whole idea of ghore baire I understand really well because I talk to a lot of friends who are from South India, from Northeast, and from Kashmir, and they're so different. I mean, even though like one can see that like you sort of could pass for a Bengali, but I think a lot of people can see like how you look. But the way we are and the kind of mannerisms, for instance, some of our retorts, our sense of humor can be called Delhi humor because a lot of people find it caustic. So I feel
Yes.
that yes, we have a lot of this acquired Delhi culture, Delhi wala culture. So let's go on to talking about your mother. And I have to, inform our viewers that I had the opportunity to interview your mother 6 years ago in the context of partition, and your mother braved not only having her first child, her firstborn was in 1947, and the kind of hardships that she had to face in that time. So we had a wonderful interview, and of course we have a Banaras Connect. So let me introduce Maya Sanyal to our viewers, and we can go on to our slide.
Right. That's my parents and my grandparents. That's my parents this day after their wedding in Kasauli. And those are my Nana and Nani, also in Kasauli. That's my grandfather, my Nana, and that's my mother's family. My Masi, my Mama, my grandparents, and their little dog Ruby. That's also in Kasauli. That's a picnic, actually, in Kasauli. There used to be this Bengali association. My grandmother was very active in that. And every year, post Dashera, that's Bijoya, they used to have this Bengali get together and they would all go for a picnic. So that's also in Kasauli. My grandmother was actually a very interesting lady. She would organize picnics, she would organize high teas, she would organize bridge parties. She was an avid bridge player. So she would have these bridge parties where they would set up these little tables of four in the garden of their house and about 6 to 8 tables, and they would all play bridge, which was followed by high tea again. So she was a very avid bridge player, and she loved it. So she was a very active person, and a very strong lady. That's again my mother and my Masi with her uncle and aunt, Tayaji. That is in Jabalpur. And this one is, of course, my mother with her mother. That's my Nani and my mother. That's my grandmother in Kasauli. The two little kids are my Masi's son and my eldest brother. And it's very interesting. I always find this photo very interesting because it's the Puja ka kamra and she's wearing a pair of kids. You don't walk around in Kasauli without shoes. So even if it's your place of prayer, you still continue to wear your shoes. So I always find this photograph very interesting. That's my mother's family again, complete family. Two uncles and yeah, that's a complete family. My grandparents, that's of course Ma, then and a few years back. That's my Dadi. That's my Dadi. Um, she actually, we have never met her. She died even before my parents got married. And that's my Dadaji. Both my Nana and my Dada were very good equestrians. One was in the army, followed by Central Research Institute, and my Dadaji was in the police service. So both of them were That's my father and our dog, who was called Bruno. This is a very interesting picture. This is my Chacha going to England to study, and the whole family has come to see him off at Howrah station. I think from there he will go to Bombay, and from Bombay he'll take the ship. So everybody is there. I can spot my brothers also, my cousins, my buas, my pupaji, and cousin chachas, my parents, everybody, and my grandfather. This one is this is me. That's me. These two are my photographs. That's my brother in our house in Shambazar in North Calcutta with another cousin. This is my father's first car, a Ford Prefect, which I think he bought in 1948. This must be 1954, 55. You can see my three brothers. I'm not in the picture. I came into the scene so much later. So most of the photographs, you'll see my brothers and my parents. I'm not there in most of the family photographs. That's the typical, that's how I think everybody knows a Bengali. Macher jhol, maj bhat, roshogolla, reading a lot of books. And that's the stereotypical concept of how a Bengali should be and is. That's how, I mean, every time a Bengali sees you, they will say, Acha, do you eat macher jhol bhat? I love roshogolla. So it's very stereotypical, but that's how a Bengali is always addressed to. This is hilsa. Hilsa is a very interesting fish, and I think Bengalis are really obsessed about their fish. I mean, there are these two iconic football clubs in Calcutta, and each one of them has a fish as their mascot. The East Bengal with hilsa and the Mohan Bagan with the prawns. That's how obsessed they are about food. So it's intermingled even with sports. That's a typical traditional Bengali meal. Rice in the middle, but this looks like a vegetarian meal to me. Or maybe there is something non-vegetarian on the outside. You can see the dal, you can see a dry vegetable, you can see a semi-curried vegetable, then there is a chutney, there is a payesh, everything is put on the plate. It's actually not too many. So that's it. Bengalis are obsessed.
At this stage,
Yeah.
At this stage, I want to ask you, so is Bengali food primarily non-vegetarian? Are there any vegetarian elements to it? Because I remember going to the Lake Market vegetarian, like a vegetable market, and I saw the number of shark that I saw. I've never seen them in Delhi.
No,
The
Bengal is
variety,
Bengal is
So tell
very
us something
fertile.
about vegetarian food.
So greens grow in abundance. And because it's full of water bodies, rivers, rivulets, fish is also available in abundance. But if we say, so Bengalis are associated with fish, of course, but the Bengali vegetarian food is absolutely amazing. Most people don't know that Bengali vegetarian meal is a meal on its own. It has so much of variety. I mean, a Bengali vegetarian meal would start with, let's say, the array of vegetarian food we have in Bengal. Every vegetable is cooked in different ways. The same vegetable, for example, something as simple as a lauki, there would be as many as, at least in our house, we have about 6 or 7 varieties of lauki. But I'm sure there are more. So every vegetable, a single preparation, there would be so much of variety. Bengali vegetarian food, I think, is very, very varied, very strong, and most people are not aware of it. But I think it is one of the best food available. I think anybody who's eaten Bengali vegetarian food would understand how delightful it is. But of course, there is a rather sad story behind it, because rather cruel story behind it. Bengali vegetarian food, I think, developed in the widow's kitchen. Uh, chil- Earlier on, you had child marriages. People got lost their husband very early in life. The Bengali widow was deprived of food, color, everything. So she was separated. Her kitchen was separate. She could eat only rice and a few greens. Her food had to be very bland so that she did not get excited. So it had to be very, very bland food, no masala. So, and then she was fasting almost every other day. She was fasting. She did not eat, she ate just one meal a day, which was her lunch. That too was very Spartan. Dinner, of course, was maybe milk and a little bit of fruits, depending on the kind of family you belong to. So, Bengali vegetarian food developed in the kitchens of the widows. They were trying to make products, they were trying to produce food items out of the very little they had. They couldn't, there were so many no's. There were certain vegetables they couldn't eat. There was a dal they couldn't eat. They couldn't have garam masala. They couldn't have onions, garlic. So Bengali vegetarian food is absolutely sattvic. So it was very sad. It was rather very sad. Now, what would happen was when these people, when they were developing food in the kitchen, some of them also would spend so much of time in the kitchen that I'm sure there would be a lot of experimentation, because what else do you do? She has no life of her own. There was another very interesting thing happening in the Bengali kitchen is uh, most of the time when the children became widows, they did not even go to their in-laws' house. They would be living with their parents, which I think in a way was slightly better, because they at least were looked after better. They were the ones who were given charge of as they grew a little older, given charge of the kitchen, at least the vegetarian section of the kitchen. And gradually, as they grew older, they were dishing out this amazing food, which I think, and soon they were cooking the vegetarian meals in their kitchen, keeping whatever they put for themselves, and rest of it they were sending it out for the rest of the family. So we had a separate Niramish kitchen.
Okay, looks like we've lost Miss Sanyal for a bit. Let me try to put her back on the. Okay, I am going to put her back on the internet. Give me a minute. Hi, Pishi, you're back on.
Yeah. Can we hear? Am I audible?
Pishi, you're audible.
I am audible. Okay. Uh, so I was talking about the Bengali kitchen. So it developed into a kitchen with a lot of variety. We basically use 5 basic spices, which is cumin, uh, fennel, mustard seeds, fenugreek, and nigella, which is kalonji. Now, either you use them separately or you combine them as panchphoran. These are the tempering spices. As a paste, we would normally be using cumin and coriander. This is, and of course, the turmeric and chilies, that's normal. So basically, the main product would be traditional Bengali vegetarian food would be ghee, using a lot of ghee. And a simple vegetarian food is it starts with boiled, which is sheddo, which would be followed by roasted, which is pora. Then you, of course, would have your dal, which was accompanied by fritters or chechki. Chechki is dry vegetable, but the vegetables are cooked in juliennes. And then it would be followed by ghonto. Ghonto could be a mushy vegetable combination. You can use any vegetable out of it. You can use lauki, you can use pumpkin, you can use just about all the vegetables possible to make a ghonto. And then you have a dalna, which is a curry. Not a thick curry, but neither a runny curry, but a curry. So this is the basic of Bengali vegetarian food. Now, each one, of course, has a lot of variation. Bengali food, again, is very different in different households. The kind of food I have grown up eating I may not have eaten in another person's house. Again, for example, in my house, I would like to talk about my house. The Bengali vegetarian food in my house has my grandmother's influence. She's from Rajshahi, and also my Dadi's influence, who's from Krishnanagar, which is in West Bengal. We come from a place called Khulna, which would have been a part of West Bengal had it not been swapped with Nadia. So we are not really Bangals. So the kind of food we eat is a little different. Now, the Bangals eat a different kind of food. The Ghotis eat a different kind of food. So even the vegetarian cooking is a little different amongst each community. But basic spices remain the same. What we eat at home, I think, is a blend of maybe Bangal and not Ghoti, but the Khulna region. I think that's what we eat at home. There's a lot of variety in it, but total credit for Bengali vegetarian cooking, I think, goes to the widows who spend so much of time in the kitchen that I remember my grandmother, she used to, when she visited us in Delhi, and she used to come once in 2 years, and she would stay with us for 6 to 8 months, sometimes a year. And she was, of course, eating vegetarian food. She would mix up those vegetables with the rice in such an amazing way. I remember I used to stand on Sundays and on holidays, I used to stand next to her with my palm extended, and she would drop those balls of rice and vegetables she was rolling on my hand. Of course, drop it because you're maintaining that social distancing. She's not supposed to touch my hand, and they were so delicious. I think my love for vegetarian food, I was never a great one for eating fish. So my love for vegetarian food, I think, started because of my grandmother, because she would visit, and when she was here, we would have a lot of vegetarian food. And I think that's when I started loving it. And the variety we have in, I think the number of vegetables we can eat in Bengal is amazing because of the way the land is. And the vegetables are cooked in such a delightful way. Now, each vegetable is cooked differently. Now, when you cook a vegetable differently, you also cut it differently. That is a major issue in a Bengali household. So, if you're making a ghonto, you'll cut your vegetables in a particular way. If you're making a dalna, you'll cut it in another way. If you are making a chechki, you'll cut it in another way. You cannot cut the vegetables in a particular way and cook it. I mean, there's no single way to cut a vegetable. So, depending on what is being cooked, you will cut your vegetables. And of course, how you cut your vegetables. They could be D shaped, they could be square shaped, they could be small, they could be very finely cut. Depending on the preparation, the Bengali vegetarian food is cut. Of course, I think the boti or the hasia helps because both your hands are free. So when you cut your vegetables, when you peel your vegetables, you can peel them really fine. And it is also easy to cut the vegetables the way you want to when both your hands are free. So, and then Bengalis eat a lot of skins. We eat skins of lauki, we eat skins of potatoes, we eat skins of pumpkins, we eat skins of just about everything possible. And they are made as chechkis and they are delicious. So, Bengali vegetarian food, nothing is wasted. In a Bengali vegetarian kitchen, not a single item is wasted, not a single product is wasted, be it the leaves, be it the vegetable on its own, the skin, the seeds, nothing goes waste. Each one has its own use. And it is a very, very elaborate kitchen. That is one of the reasons why when we cook vegetarian food, I mean, even when you are invited for for a meal which is essentially a non-vegetarian meal, you would have to cross a hurdle of about 5, 6 vegetables to reach your fish. It is not complete without these vegetables. So that is one of the reasons why I think it has not been. I mean, when we think of Bengali food, the first thing that comes in our mind is march bhat, fish and rice. But no, it is a lot of vegetables and they taste so good. Each one with a distinct taste because we are leaving the vegetables as it is. We are not spicing it up a lot. There's just ghee, just a little blend of salt and sugar, and light spices. So it tastes perfect. You can actually feel each of the vegetables you're eating. So a standard Bengali meal in a home would start with something bitter, especially from the month of, I think from March till about September, October. You do eat something bitter because it is supposed to be good for your system. So it starts with something bitter, which is followed by, bitter is a must, which is followed by a standard meal, dal with either some fried vegetables or a dry vegetables, which will be followed by a basic ghonto. The ghonto can be made with, in summer, of course, you'll have your toris and the laukis. In winter, it would be cauliflowers and cabbages. So depending on the season, you would use the vegetable. And that would be followed by the dalna, which is a slightly more runny variety of vegetables. Every vegetable, most of the time, I mean, we have taken to potatoes. I think we use potatoes in just about everything we cook. Nothing is cooked without potatoes. So, and then that is followed by a basic fish curry. And in summers, you would have either a chutney or an ombol, which is a very light, runny mango. I think it's eaten, that of course is eaten, I know, in Bihar and UP also, Eastern UP. And in parts of Orissa, slightly runny, so giving you that coolness, followed by ghar ki bani hui dahi with a little bit of sugar. That's your standard Bengali meal, which we grew up eating. It's just that at that time I didn't like it. Now I crave it. for it and I don't get it. But we were forced to eat these vegetables and never liked it. I think I learned to eat vegetarian food because of my grandmother, because she would mix it so beautifully. The other thing very unique about Bengali vegetarian food especially is we eat everything separately. We never mix up. A little bit of rice and you pull your boiled vegetable. A little bit of rice and you pull your dal. A little bit of rice and you pull again your mushy vegetable. So nothing is mixed up together. Every vegetable is eaten separately with a little bit of rice. So the rice is the hero of the story, right in the middle, and you pull it a little bit and add it to every vegetable of yours. You never mix it up. You don't pile up your plate with an assorted vegetable and mix it up, eat it. You eat them separately. So when you attend a Bengali wedding or a Bengali feast, you'll be served food separately, individually. So that's very important, eating your food separately, individually, because each one will have its own special taste. Even the Bengali dal is very interesting because each dal will have a different chonk. So the same dal, if you're eating a moong dal, it'll be very different from a matar ki dal, or very different from a masoor ki dal, very different from chane ki dal. So every dal will have its own chonk. You wouldn't use, and basically everything is other than masoor ki dal, because masoor ki dal again is considered Amish or non-vegetarian. So the widows were not allowed to eat masoor ki dal. So masoor ki dal is the only dal where you can have pyaz ka chonk. Other than that, all other dals are completely vegetarian. Actually, even Bengali fish preparations are cooked without onions and garlic if you're a Bengali Hindu. So we don't use a lot of onions and garlic. And that just reminds me, I don't know, I'm deviating a little bit, but I remember about 20 years back when we had that onion crisis, I was in Calcutta for a short while. And I was really surprised because people were talking about onions are not available. And I kept thinking, how the hell does it matter if onions are not available? Because we don't eat onions in our food. We don't eat in our vegetables. We don't eat in our fish. And that's also when I realized that Bengalis had also adopted and adapted the pan-Indian food with onions and garlic. So on today's date, vegetarian Bengali meal is not available so easily. Even in the younger generations, I don't even know if people know how to cook it. I think with my generation, the Bengali vegetarian food comes to an end because nobody's really cooking it. I don't think people have really developed a taste for it. So it's rather sad. So I would love it if this could be promoted because it is so fantastic. It's one of the best things. So though it started with a very sad story, but ultimately what has come out of that kitchen is absolutely delightful, most delicious. And I think people should try Bengali vegetarian more than the fish part of it, if it's available. But I think for a Bengali vegetarian meal, you need to visit houses. It's not available in commercial setups. So yes, I can just go on and on about Bengali vegetarian, but I think most people would also like to know a bit about our fondness for fish. And why are we so fond of fish? I think that is also because it's available. Fish is available in plenty. Therefore, we eat fish. I mean, I think most of the coastal region people eat fish, so do we. But fish is again prepared differently in different parts. Bengal is actually huge. You have, when we think about the undivided Bengal, it is so huge. It's bordering Orissa, it's bordering Assam, it's bordering Myanmar, it's bordering the hill tracts up north. So the food, it is such a huge country on its own. If we could join up West Bengal and East, that food is again very differently cooked. Even fish is very differently cooked. But I think I'll again say the region I come from, I think fish is available the most because we are at the mouth of the Sundarban, Khulna, and it is full of water bodies. So plenty of fish is available of various sizes and shapes, including huge crayfish. That is also available in plenty. And I think the Bengalis even cook fish differently when they stay in different parts of Bengal. So if you're from the east, or if you're from the area where the fish is very fresh, you would never fry your fish. It would be just slid into the curry. And you would not really, except for one or two preparations where I think we have a bit of Islamic influence, the rest of the fish preparations are again with no onions, no garlic. Whereas, and we don't fry the fish. Whereas when we come to the West Bengal part of Bengal, the fish is fried. It is really fried, and so it's cooked very differently. So for a West Bengal person to eat fish cooked by the East Bengal people can be a little difficult, and vice versa. So fish is again cooked differently. Mache jhol is a very, we talk about mache jhol, but mache jhol is again different in different households. The mache jhol I eat at home, I don't think I've eaten it anywhere else. So every household has a mache jhol, which is more or less unique to their family. And I think that is one of the reasons why Bengali food cannot be termed, Bengali food is very varied. And I don't think we can really pinpoint and say this is Bengali food. Again, we have been very influenced by the Islamic movement. We have been, that is the invaders. And then, of course, the Nawabs who stayed on in Bengal. Then we have been influenced by when the Britishers came, with them came because of the business factor. We had the Armenians and we had the Jews and we had the Italians, we had French. So a lot of people came into Bengal. So again, food was adapted and adopted in various ways. On today's date, Bengali food is very different. It is very varied, and it is, of course, equally strong on non-vegetarian as it is on vegetarian. So that is how we can sum up Bengali food when we are talking about Bengali food. Again, Bengal is not complete without its mithai. How can we not talk about mishti and talk about
Okay, before
Bengal
we
and
move on
mishti?
to Mithai Pishi, there is a question, which is, can
Yes.
you please tell us, Sumitra Sen asks, can you please
Hmm.
tell us a little bit about Dhonka Dalna? I don't think I
Oh,
pronounced it correctly.
yeah, dhoka. Dhoka is actually, it literally means dhoka, the same dhoka. Because there was a lot of non-vegetarian food happening in the kitchens of vegetarian cooking. So dhoka was when it's basically you grind the chane ki dal, and then you steam it, cut it into pieces, fry it, and then you cook it. Now, the whole purpose is when you're steaming it, when you grind the chane ki dal, you add a little bit of hing and a little bit of spices to it. And when you cook it, it gets that feel, because of its sponginess, gets that feel of as if you're eating something non-vegetarian, which you're not supposed to eat. So dhoka dalna, so that is why it's a dhoka, literally a dhoka. The other, and the same way we make our kathel. Now that is called in kathel, in Bengal, it is called gach patha, which is basically a goat of the tree. Again, the feel is that of my grandmother would always say that I shouldn't be naming it, but it is tasting just like that, because she wouldn't want to name fish or meat. I mean, that she's not supposed to think about. So she said, but it is tasting just like that. So both dhoka and kathel. The whole story behind it is both these vegetables, the dhoka not a vegetable, but both these preparations when cooked taste a bit like foremeat. And that is why it's called a dhoka. It's literally a dhoka. So that is the thing of behind dhoka dalna.
Okay, also before we move on to the sweet section, which I think is something that everyone wants to hear about, I think we would like to know what exactly, because everyone, since it's the puja time and there's a lot of festivity in the air, despite all the gloominess around us, I just want to ask you, what exactly is this Durga Puja feast, if there is anything like that? What are the special preparations and things like that?
Durga Puja, traditionally, those 5 days, you don't cook at home. You eat out. It's only on the last day, which is Vijaya Dashami, that you have a meal at home, which is your dinner. And that would traditionally be kosha mangsho and luchi, cholar dal, and a bhaja. That is your Vijaya Dashami meal, followed by sweets. During the puja, most of the time you are not cooking at home. I mean, those are, I think, 5 days of respite for also the women of the house. So during the day, you would be either eating your at the pandal or bring it home. The the usual that is made in the puja at the puja place, or in the evenings you have your whatever. I mean, there is no puja, you have whatever is available. So a lot of non-vegetarian food, and I think this bothers a lot of people, because in the same pandal you have the puja going on, and right across the same premises you have kebabs being churned out. But we look at Durga Puja as something, it's more of a festival for us. It is religious, of course, but we look at Durga Puja a little bit. Yes, I couldn't remember the word bhog. Now she's got it. I also, right. Bhog is very important. That is what you eat for lunch. And in the evenings, you eat street food of various kinds. There is no, I don't think there is food cooked at home during those 5 days of puja. It's only on the last day that you cook your Vijaya food, which is mangsho. So during the Durga Puja, you're basically eating out. Whether you're eating at the puja pandal, or you're eating at restaurants, or you're eating street foods, but you're eating out. It's a lot of food. I mean, I think every Bengali becomes a glutton during those 5 days of Durga Puja. From evening all through the night, you're eating. I don't know what's going to happen this year, though. But yes, it's a lot of food. So Durga Puja is associated with food more than anything else, I think. I mean, when I think of Durga Puja, at least when I was growing up, my mother would make a lot of sweets. My brothers used to visit during puja. So Ma would get busy making her gojas and narkul narus and pantuas, all homemade sweets. She would make them in canisters and plenty of it, which would finish in just 24 hours. But so that is how we had a lot of homemade sweets when we were in Kanpur and in Delhi. But and my mother would also, because my father wanted food to be cooked at home. But most of the time, food is not cooked during those 5 days of Durga Puja. You eat your bhog during your lunchtime. Either you go there to eat it or you get it home. And dinner, you go pandal hopping, eat wherever, whatever is available, essentially a lot of non-vegetarian food. So that is Durga Puja celebration. And we are not vegetarians during Durga Puja. We don't have any Navratri issue. So about a few years back, it became a major issue about why is non-vegetarian food cooked in the premises. But I think even they have decided to give up. So non-vegetarian food is very important during Durga Puja, even if it's not rest of the year. So yes, every Bengali becomes a glutton. And the puja celebration, actually, yes, everybody becomes a glutton during those 5 days. So
Okay.
as such,
Yeah,
there is
please go
no,
ahead.
uh, I think there is no cooking at home. That is a very important factor. There is no cooking at home, so everybody gets respite. And that's one of the, so that you can go out, you can go pandal hopping, you can go to restaurants. So that is very, very important. That is very important. So that is, I think, the Bengali celebration is basically eating the bhog and eating non-vegetarian in the evening. Bhog is, of course, again, very sattvic. Standard bhog is khichuri, but on certain days there'll be luchi, or on a particular day there could be even what we call ghee bhat. But commercial pujas, because it becomes more expensive, I think on all days it remains khichuri with mixed vegetable mush, chutney, and paesh, and papad. So that's a standard, and a little bit of fritters with it. So that's a standard Bengali bhog meal, which tastes absolutely divine. I think the puja flavor gets seeps into the. So all bhogs taste very good wherever you eat it. It tastes the same and it tastes excellent. But
That's
Bengali
correct.
celebration, I think Bengalis are so obsessed about food. I don't think I've come across any community as obsessed about food as Bengalis are. So I think food becomes a very important part of our conversation. For example, if there is a wedding, the menu setting is something which involves the whole family, the seniors of the family. I mean, you're talking, you can have your jewelry and your clothes, but the menu setting becomes a very important factor. I mean, there are tiffs, fights, arguments, what is going to come, what is not going to be there. So it's a major thing. Nowadays, of course, earlier on, we used to have commercial cooks come home and cook. There would be one person, either one of your uncles or one of your father's very close friend, who would be monitoring the cook. I mean, sitting there amidst in that heat and monitoring the cook, whether it's working out fine or not. So the food is very important. Nowadays, of course, we have the caterers, but I remember when my niece was getting married, we had, for a month, we would have tasting of various food items. My mother, my brother, his wife, and sometimes a few other people would hop along, taste the food, approve, disapprove. So they're slightly obsessed about food, I think. Food is very important. I think Bengalis love food more than any. I think perhaps more, I think as much as they love movies or books. I think it all, I don't know whether they like books more than they love food, or whether they love movies more than they, but Bengalis, I think, love food, movies, and books in the same
Football.
breath. They can talk about it. I mean, that's very typically Bengali. So I suppose that's how a Bengali is. Food is very
That's how we match
important.
them. Okay, so
That's
we have
how.
one question. Could you please let us know a little more about labra? I can't pronounce these. Lobra,
Labra,
labra,
labra, labra.
labra.
Labra is a mixed vegetable. All the vegetables which is available. So it'll have pumpkin, it'll have brinjal, it'll have maybe parval, it'll have tori, it'll of course have potatoes, and they are all mixed together. It's mushy, and when you're making a labra in the commercial kitchen, they don't even add a lot of spices or ghee. It's of course pachforan. Pachforan is what you use. It's cooked usually in mustard oil, and it is of course spiced up. A little bit of salt, a little bit of sugar, and it's a very mushy kind of a vegetable. Uh, Labras, I think, when made in huge quantity, tastes the best, because the more vegetables you have, they cook better in their own heat. So labra, I don't think, will turn out as good when you make it at home. But every time you make a huge quantity of labra, I think it tastes just fantastic. And it's usually, you can also call it pachmishali. I mean, labra can also be called a pachmishali, which is basically 5 vegetables. and it's kind of mushy. Oh, shukto. Chochuri is, of course, again, mixed vegetables. Cooked, you need a lot of oil to cook chochuri. A good chochuri requires a lot of oil. Otherwise, it does not taste good. You need spinach, which gives it that body. You need bodi, which is a must, and your standard vegetables. Chochuri is going to definitely have pumpkin, the sweet pumpkin, the red one. It will have parval. It will have tori. It will have bangan. It will have aloo, the bodi, and they're all cooked in pachforan, sarson ka tel, and spiced up with, and you keep cooking till all the vegetables are cooked, not overcooked but cooked. And it's kind of the brinjal and the pumpkin and the green, that is, it could be palak ki saag or it could be any other saag, gives it that slightly soft texture. That is a chochuri, very important. The chochuri is basically, in a normal Bengali household, chochuri will be made out of all the vegetables that's left, and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and a chochuri is made. You can also add fish head to the chochuri. That also is supposed to taste very, very good. Shukto is a bitter. Shukto is very important for in a Bengali household, and shuktos have a lot of variety. The standard shukto is, of course, your standard few vegetables. It's white in color. You never add chilies to shukto. You normally have it at room temperature, and it's a slightly sweet, slightly salty, and it's bitter. You use Karela, and in Bengal you don't use Karela, you use something called Uche, which is deadly. Karela is sweet in comparison, or you use any other bitter leaf. So shukto is supposed to be bitter, but it has this bitter, sweet, salt flavor tang to it. And I think children hate it, but as you grow older, I think you develop a taste for shukto, and it tastes very good. But I think you need to develop a taste for shukto. And again, shukto is associated with Bengalis. I mean, that is another thing. I think after Machen Jhol and Rasgulla, the third most often asked question is about shukto. And that we can give credit to Hawkins and Prestige. Both their recipe booklets have food from different parts of India. And in the Bengali section, they have a shukto. So a lot of my friends want to know how shukto is made. Why don't you make shukto for us? Just 2 days back, I had an argument with a friend of mine. She said, why are you making so much of fuss? Why can't you make shukto? So I said, no, I can't make shukto because I can't put it in the refrigerator after that. So yes, shukto is something, I think, another food item which I think a lot of non-bongs know about it. And
Question.
it is slightly...
No, it's slightly what? Go ahead, please.
It's bitter. It's bitter. Shukto is bitter. But shukto is not just an assorted vegetable. You can have shukto with individual vegetables also. So you can have your lauki with Karela, and that is also a shukto. And shukto has a lot of variety. Again, the spices used in shukto differs from house to house. Like the shukto I eat at my house is very different from the shukto I would eat at my aunt's house. It is again different. So Bengali food cannot be generalized. Thor, yes, Thor is the trunk of the banana plantation. The trunk, that is the thor. Again, very popular with the Bengalis. Nowadays, nobody cooks it because it's an ordeal. Peeling it and piling, it's an ordeal. And your hand becomes eventually sticky and black at the end of it. So we don't really eat a lot of both mocha, of course, we still eat, which is the banana flour. But thor, I think one is eating lesser and lesser these days. And both of them, they're both dry. And these are all but they don't fall into a very conventional common Bengali because they're tedious, they take a lot of time. So you would always have a mocha made if there is somebody coming over or for a special meal. You won't have a mocha being made on a regular, or at least not on today's date, because again it is an effort to peel them, cut them as much, and so is it with the thor. So these are certain food items I think they're slowly going out of our kitchen because of the complexity of its preparation. The prepping up is difficult. So it is slowly going out of our kitchen.
Okay, so my question is because I'm uninitiated here. So you have to tell me, how is Shukto different from Teto?
Teto is bitter. Teto means bitter. Teto is bitter. Literally translated is bitter. Shukto is the vegetable preparation. Teto is actually, Shukto is not a teto. Teto is the what we start our meal with. We normally would start our meal with a little bit of boiled potatoes with a little bit of karela mashed up together. Now that would be the teto. Or we would have neem and bangan together. That would be a teto. Shukto is a vegetable on its own. It's a vegetable preparation where you add a little bit of bitter to give it that sweet, salt, bitter taste. And bitter is always a palate cleanser. Whenever you eat, can you hear me?
Yes.
So whenever you eat bitter, there's a saying in Bengal that when you start your meal with something bitter, everything else tastes superb after that because you've eaten the worst. But shukto is, of course, can be, but children don't like shukto. The bitterness is not acceptable to children. But as you grow older, I think there are certain food items. I mean, I had to be pushed into eating shukto as a child. Today, I love it. I mean, I could eat it every day. But shukto
Me too.
it's a bitter preparation. It's a bitter preparation, but it is not a teto. I can't call shukto a teto.
Okay. Now the question is that these are essential part of a Bengali, like a real Bengali meal. Now I want to ask you this question, that in Bengali food, how is it that, like, when do you have this dahi? Is it towards the end that you have dahi, or in the beginning you have dahi?
No, dahi is absolutely the last thing. Dahi is at home, it is your mithai. So either you have dahi where you sort of condense the milk a little bit, add sugar to it, and then make the meetha dahi, or else you make the normal khatta dahi and add sugar to it. But dahi is absolutely the last thing you would have. It is a part of your meetha. So you
Got
don't
it.
eat, yes, yes. Dahi is never a part of your main meal. It is absolutely
Main
at the
meal.
end of the meal. After chutney, the dahi part of it comes. And otherwise, if you're not making dahi at home, that is the meetha dahi also you can make at home, which is you add sugar to the milk and then you make the dahi, condense it marginally and then make the dahi, which tastes very good. Or you buy the commercial dahi, which is available in the market. That is the mishti doi.
Okay.
But dahi
Now,
is always at the end of a meal.
okay. Now there is a saying, no, in Hindi, ek to karela upar se neem chada. Isn't that true about Bengali food? That there is a karela and a neem chadha karela?
Well, there is a karela and then there is a neem also. We eat both and we love both. Because I think traditionally, because of smallpox, all these things were eaten. And now it has become a part of our food. But in the earlier times, it was basically for to sort of take care of your smallpox. That is when you had your bitters. So you had your neem. I remember, so all these seasonal ailments that you get, your measles and your chicken pox, and I think to ward them off, you have the bitters.
Hmm.
So you have your neem. I remember as a child, I used to have a cup full of neem ka pani, which was neem thrown into water, boiled together with haldi, and had to drink it up. So karwa is something, so neem and karela are both very much a part of a Bengali diet, basically to ward off your ailments and illness. And so you start eating karelas, the bitters, in March with the advent of spring, and you sort of carry on till the end of monsoon. And of course, shukto is eaten all through the year. It's just that the vegetables change. If you're eating a shukto in summer, it'll be a different set of vegetables, whereas in winter, it'll be another set of vegetables. But shukto will remain the same. And it'll have its karela, of course.
Okay, so that's the main sort of course. Now, and the different courses. Now, coming on to mithai, I want to ask you, what is this big separation, divide between the mithais? Because every corner you see a mithai shop. Now, if there is a mithai shop in around every cul-de-sac, every corner, then what are women making at home, or what are men making at home? Is there a mithai at all that's made at
No,
home?
mithai making, I think, is on today's date. I don't think people make a lot of mithais. Mithais were basically made in villages, in smaller towns, and mithais were made by the Pravasi Bengalis. Like my grandmother would make a lot of mithai, and my mother would make a lot of mithai. In Calcutta, you don't necessarily make, unless and until you're making an odd fancy mithai here or there, you don't really make mithais, you buy the mithai. So in a normal Calcutta setup, you don't, say for a few typical traditional ones, each household will have their own mithai, which is made at home. But most of the time, the mithais are bought from the market. But mithais are made in the smaller towns, and the mithais that are made at home are, of course, the traditional mithais, like you would make your narkul narus and the patishaptas and the pithes, which were, so they're very different. They're very different from the mithais you would buy in the market. I mean, I would not go to a sweet shop to buy a patishapta, or I wouldn't go to a sweet shop to buy a narkul naru. I mean, that is something that would be made at home. So there is a distinct divide between mithais made at home and mithais which are to be bought from the market. So I wouldn't buy a pithe from the, which is basically during Sankranti. The covering is that of rice, and you stuff it with coconut jaggery, and then steam in milk. And then there are various other, it's a kind of a dumpling. So all these things are made at home. The traditional Bengali mithai would be made at home. That you will never get in the market. And even though you do get them in the markets nowadays, but most of us would make it at home. We wouldn't buy it from the market. From what you buy from the market are the commercial mithais, the sandesh and the various forms of raswali mithai. That's very different. That is usually not made at home, unless and until you are from a place where these mithais are not available.
So what is this
The
ghono doodh? Sorry, I'm sorry,
ghono
can't
dudh,
pronounce it right.
ghono dudh is basically condensed milk. You keep stirring the milk and it's sort of is boiling, and you keep stirring, and you let the malai come on top, and then you stick the malai to the side of the kadhai, and you keep boiling till it reaches that level of thickness, the milk, and that is ghano doodh. Ghano doodh is not rabri. Ghano doodh is lighter than rabri, and ghano doodh basically you eat post dinner in either with bananas, or in summers you would eat it with your mangoes. So ghano doodh is something, it's totally homemade, and it's condensed milk. You keep condensing the milk, and you keep boiling it. It's very tedious. Again, it's very tedious. I think Bengali food, I somehow feel it's very time consuming. Most of them are very time consuming.
I was going to say rabdi or khurchan, and then one of Ganga Jamuni supporters,
No,
Ashokji, says that rabdi or khurchan, and then glad we didn't say that because it's sacrilegious to say such a thing, because it's lighter than rabdi, it seems.
it is lighter. It is lighter. And again, rabri is made differently. The rabri you get in Delhi is quite different from the rabri you get in Calcutta. Bengalis also make rabri. But Bengali rabri and the Dilli rabri, they're completely different. Delhi rabri is a lot of lachha in, and the milk and the lachha are almost entwined together. Whereas the Calcutta rabri, you can actually feel the pieces of the malai, you can bite into it in the ghano dudh. So it's a little different. That is also called rabri, but it's very different from the Dilli wali rabri. Khurchan, of course, is again very different. You get it in UP and Delhi. But Ghano Dudh is, and the rabri. I mean, Ghano Dudh is usually made at home. Rabri you buy from the market. You don't make rabri at home.
I remember this anecdote that sort of you mentioned once some years ago about moti chur ka laddu. Can you share that?
That's Allahabad. That we go to Allahabad. Allahabad has this very famous shop, very famous for motichur ki laddu. Actually, whole of UP is very famous for. Kanpur has its motichur ki laddu. Allahabad has, Banaras has. So motichur ki laddu is so. The motichur ki laddu of Allahabad is when you sort of drop it on the ground, वो बिखर जाते हैं और हर एक दाना आपको दिखाई देगा. Like all the little motis you can actually see, and my brother would actually demonstrate it. He would come from Allahabad. He used to be in Allahabad those days. He would come. The first time he brought it, he promptly dropped it on the dining table and he said, "This is how a motichur is made." So that is the way. That's a motichur. I think motichur ki laddu, and honestly, that is a motichur you don't get elsewhere. And you can get it in all the places in UP, whether it is Kanpur, whether it is Banaras, whether it's Allahabad. This motichur, the Delhi motichur is quite different. They stick together.
Yeah.
But that motichur is actually bikharte hain. And you can see each and every dana sparkling and staring at you like the motis. So, yes. Actually,
Okay.
Banaras has a lot of good Bengali sweets.
It does. My first ever Kheer Kadam was in Banaras. And of course,
Mm.
Long Lata. And a lot of
Yeah,
Bengalis actually settled down in Banaras. So there's a big Bengali
right.
influence. And of course, the
Yes,
widows and,
absolutely.
a lot of patrons who are in
Yes.
Bengal, in Banaras. Now, we've talked about mithai, we've talked about food, we've talked about family. Can we talk a little bit about some of your explorations and your adventures in Delhi? I'm going to show a couple of photographs from your college time. Your college
Mm.
was Lady Shri Ram College. So tell us some
Right.
of your stories about how your own exploration of your identity started, I believe, much later after college.
Much later. Our college had a Bengali society, and we had a Bengali department. In those days, most of the Delhi university colleges had a Delhi Bengali department, and I was so much in denial of my Bengali roots. So when they came to admit me to that department, to the Bengali Association, I literally ran. I did not want to be a part of the Bengali Association, which, of course, over the years has changed. I'm very happy being a Bengali. This is Calcutta. This is college. This is my farewell. Explorations, I mean, I think I have, like I say, I have never known Bengalis in my life other than my family. College was almost the same. Though LSR had a lot of Bengalis, but I think I stayed away from them. And so my friends were always from the south of India, from UP, from Punjab. I did not, so it was very different. I think in my case, it was very different. I grew up I think, in a very different Delhi. And now when I look back, I think I also lived in a bubble, which was very different from the Delhi I live in today. I very protected, lived in our own world. We did not know much about what was happening around us. very honestly. Uh, we thought we were the greatest intellectuals around, but uh, I don't know. We were very different. We are not. I think we lived in a bubble. That part of growing up is very different from my later exploration, which started, I think, in my 30s. That is, I think, when I really got to know Delhi. And it was also slightly work related. That's when we would be going to Old Delhi, to the lanes behind Turkman for our work. And I think that is when I really got to know Delhi, the Chandni Chowks and the various lanes. And it was essentially started work related. And I think that is when I got to know Delhi in a different way, the walks around in Delhi. But my Delhi when I was growing up was very different. It was almost sanitized. I grew up in a place which is, I grew up in Nizamuddin. It had its own set of, its own kind of people. So it was very different. It was very, very different. Uh, I'm seeing a lot of, this is Calcutta, that's Fleury's and that's Furpose. Furpose, of course, closed down in the 60s. Fleury's still exists. So Delhi, yes, Delhi. My Delhi is, I think today I know Delhi a lot more than I did when I was growing up. That I realized. I mean, my Delhi, I think I got to know Delhi much later. My Delhi when I was growing up was very different, very different. We did go to Chandni Chowk to get our puri alus, and we went to Ghantewala, but it was very sanitized kind of existence. Uh, I really did not know the city. I knew only my kind of people. No, that is another thing. All the people I knew were, we came from similar background. So it was, I don't think it was very, the exploration started much later. I think as I grew up, the explorations of Delhi started. And I think my love for Delhi has increased a lot over the years. My own Delhi was, like they say, Baba Log Wali Dilli. Not really the Delhi I would be very proud of today.
Certainly, I think that's the story for many of us. But we are going to just conclude by asking you, how did you discover that being a Delhi bong is different from being a, let's say, Kolkata bong or a bong bong? So let's end it with that.
Yes, a Delhi bong. I think, since I don't even think I'm a Pravasi Bengali, so I don't have any Bengali connection in Delhi. I have a lot of Bengali connection in Calcutta, but I don't think I would ever be able to live in Calcutta. I love that city, but I wouldn't be able to. Delhi bong is, I think, there are people like me who they've grown up in Delhi, they've lived in Delhi, but they have had a very cosmopolitan existence where they have had friends from different parts of India, Delhi being the melting pot. And so the Bengali root, I mean, for me, Chittaranjan Park has never excited me because that wasn't a part of what I was looking for. If I wanted something very Bengali, I would go to Calcutta. So my connect with Delhi has been very different. So that is why I always say I'm a Bong, therefore I am a Bengali, and I live in Delhi. That makes me a Dilliwala. And it's the combination of the two, a Bong who lives in Delhi, but I'm definitely not a Bong who has lived in Delhi through a couple of generations. And I have never lived in Calcutta, so I cannot even call myself a Bengali from Calcutta, much as I love that city. I don't really know that city. The only people I know in the city are my own people. So that is how I say that Delhi is my city. I am a Bengali, therefore I'm a Delhi Bong.
Okay, so Arnav Sen Gupta asks, what
What is
differentiates a
the
Pravasi?
from a Probashi Bengali is Probashi anywhere. Why Probashi Bengali? A Probashi anywhere is holding on to his or her roots. Even when things change, you're holding on to roots which are quite archaic, perhaps. So that is what Probashi is. Nowadays, I don't think we have that many Probashis, Bengalis. I think most of the people who are living in Delhi now are here because they have come from other cities, work related. But Probashi Bengali is somebody who does not really have roots in Bengal. The roots are where they live. Their roots are in the cities they live in. That is what makes them, but they're Bengalis. But they have very little connect with Kolkata. They wouldn't be able to live in Kolkata. And if you're a Bengali, let's say Delhi is different, but if you were a Bengali from, let's say, UP, you wouldn't even be speaking the language properly. You wouldn't know how to read and write the language. So it's very different. Your mother tongue, for all practical purpose, would be Hindi, though you're speaking Bengali. You're eating Bengali food at home. So a Probashi Bengali is very different from a Bengali coming from Calcutta, completely different. There's no, I mean, I don't think they're very, there's no connection between the two because they are Bengalis who have lived away from Kolkata and they've never really lived in that city. So they don't even understand the city or its culture or its way of life. A Probashi Bengali will be more comfortable living in the city they're living in. So they're very different. They're very, very different because their roots are in the cities they live in, not in, just because they're a Bengali, they're Bengalis does not mean that they have to be connected to Bengal or to Kolkata. I mean, that is something which has always disturbed me. आप कहाँ से है? मैं दिल्ली से ही हूँ. So that connection, but I don't think I'm a Prawashi because my family is not from here. You know, they are all from Calcutta. So I cannot become a Prawashi, even if I wanted to become one, because my connect is totally in Calcutta. I mean, rest of them would write hometown Calcutta. So I suppose that's the difference. That could be the difference.
Okay. So, before we end, I want to thank you for this wonderful, very informal conversation, as always, very animated. And I also want to say that I know that Ashok ji had a question about Roshanpura. Um, he asked us about this Roshanpura Mandir. I think that would be taken up tomorrow when we have our concluding session of this Bengal sphere,
Right.
as this whole Bengal sort of conversations that we're having on Ganga Jamuni. Tomorrow, Samrat Banerjee will be joining us at 7 p.m. and he will be talking about Kali Puja, Durga Puja, and beyond spirituality. So we will be having a chat with him, and he will be talking about his family's Durga Puja they have had an uninterrupted Durga Puja celebration in Delhi. And so they are also Delhi bongs, but Pravasi Delhi bongs. So we will be talking about that tomorrow. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And I really want to especially mention Mandira Moitra, and Mandira Malik. And thank you so much for being so active, and everyone here for asking us wonderful questions. And Pishi, I can't thank you enough for
Thank
doing
you.
this wonderful, session with us. It was so, it feels so like real, no? It feels like a conversation, a real conversation. Dil se.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Have a great evening, everyone. See you tomorrow at 7. Sunday at 7, Samrat Banerjee will be talking to us about Durga Puja beyond spirituality. See you tomorrow. Good night.